We're going to begin on the bottom of Yud Beis Omer Aleph, Rav Papa Omar. Let's just review what we know as a segue into tonight's discussion. The Mishnah at the beginning of the Masechta had already established that a second string Kohen Gadol was appointed in event that the first Kohen Gadol, the primary Kohen Gadol, would have been excluded. Let's say he had some sort of contact with Tumah. But the question is, let's say this happened in the morning of Yom Kippur. Now we bring in the second string Kohen Gadol to replace the primary Kohen Gadol, who now became Pasul. But the problem is that a Kohen Gadol, before he does the Avodah, he needs what's called Chinuch, which means he has to go through a process which usually requires that he wears Big Day Kohen Gadol. Now, during the rest of the year, there's no problem. If you want to be Mechanech a Kohen to make him into a Kohen Gadol, then he'll wear the Shmona Begadim and he'll do an Avodah of a Kohen Gadol. But on Yom Kippur, after the Tamid Shel Shachar, the balance of the day, the Kohen Gadol is wearing 4 Begadim, which are the same 4 Begadim that a Kohen Hedjot wears the entire year. And the Gemara therefore is very perplexed. How do we solve the problem of bringing in the second Kohen Gadol to replace the first without going through a process of chinuch? If he's going to do the avodah of the Kohen Gadol, he's going to wear the same 4 begadim that he would wear as a Kohen Hedjot. And the concept of chinuch, to break in a Kohen as a Kohen Gadol, requires, at the very minimum, some action that gives a heker, and it becomes obvious that he is doing this avodah as a Kohen Gadol. So the last that we discussed was Abaye. Abaye comes up with the following solution to this problem. He says that this second string Kohen Gadol should use a certain kli, a certain utensil, to turn over the emurim. Those are the parts of the animal that are burnt on the mizbeach, on the H, on the maracha. And if it's not burning well, he should turn it upside down in order that it should burn more properly. And the law is that only a Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippurim is allowed to do this avodah. And therefore, by doing this avodah, even though he's wearing only 4 begadim, so he's wearing the identical begadim that he would have worn as a Kohen Hedjot, but the heker, that which makes it clear that he's functioning as a Kohen Gadol, is the fact that he does that particular avodah. And now we get to Rav Papa. Rav Papa has his own solution to this problem. And here we turn to Daf Yud Beis Amud Beis. Rav Papa Omar, Avodaso Michanchasa. Says Rav Papa, I don't need any sort of a heker here. I don't have to force him to wear different begadim, to do different avodos. His chinuch is built in to the avodah itself. Sometimes you don't need a preliminary preparatory stage, but the avodah per se is able to generate a status change. And in this case, the change is to give him the status of a Kohen Gadol. And that's called in the Lashon Hashas, Avodaso Mechanchaso. And now Rav Papa is going to demonstrate this with another case where we apply this principle of Avodaso Mechanchaso. But just to simplify Avodaso Mechanchaso in this context, the Kohen, who's now filling in the shoes, stepping into the shoes of the Kohen Gadol, is going to do the Avodas Yoma Kippurim. And if he's doing that Avodah, which only a Kohen Gadol could do on Yom Kippur, that itself engenders his status change as a Kohen Gadol. Milo Tanya, didn't we learn a parallel case of chinuch in the case of kol keleim she'asa Moshe? all the utensils that were used in the Mishkan as kli shares, which means they had a special level of kedusha, Moshe Rabbeinu did an act in which he generated the status change of the kli, upgrading it to the status of a kli shares. What was that action that Moshe implemented? That was called Mishichasan B'Shemen HaMishcha Mikad Shasam. He was able to effectuate a kiddush to sanctify these utensils for the purpose of Avodas HaMishkan by anointing them with the Shemen HaMishcha. However, that was only during the time of Moshe Rabbeinu. In subsequent generations, they didn't have the possibility of being Makadesh the Klei Shares by using Mashicha. They didn't have that as an option, of Mashicha B'Shemen HaMishcha. So therefore, the Brisa asks the question, without even asking it, answers the question, Mikan V'elech, question mark, in subsequent generations, when they needed Kalim in other Mishkanos, or later on at the time of Shlomo Melech, when they built the Beis HaMikdash, how did they sanctify the Kalim to upgrade them to the status of a Kli Sharetz? And the answer is, if they didn't have the possibility of using Shemen HaMishcha, then Avodasan Mechanchasan. The very moment that you use these kalim, these utensils, in the structure, in the framework of the avoda itself sanctifies the kli. It's what we call simultaneity. Simultaneously, the kli is used in the capacity of the avoda, and it is sanctified and upgraded to the status of a kli sharetz. Hachanami here too. The second string Kohen Gadol, when he fills in on behalf of the first Kohen Gadol who became Tameh, then the very avoda that he does, which is an avoda that only the Kohen Gadol could do, that itself will sanctify this Kohen and give him the status of a Kohen Gadol. So that's the principle called avodaso mechanchaso. Now, the Gemara is going to quote a machlokes tanoim, which will touch on another possible method in which we can achieve a kiddush, a sanctification of the second string Kohen Gadol. And that has to do with one of the four begadim which the Kohen Hedjot wore during the entire course of the year. Let's go through very quickly the four begadim that every Kohen, a Kohen Hedjot, had to wear when he did the avoda in the Beis HaMikdash. If we go from top to bottom, we have what's called a mitznefes, which is the hat that he wore. And then we get to the ksones, which is the tunic that he wore around his body. Below that, he wore michnasayim. But between the ktones and the michnasayim, he wore what's called an avneit, a belt. And we're going to have a whole discussion now in the Gemara. What substance was that avneit made of? And we'll have two possibilities. We're going to have one possibility, which is called butz. Butz is a very fancy kind of linen, otherwise known as pishtan. And another possibility is that it was made of both pishtan and semer, which is a combination of wool and linen that normally, outside the context of the Beis HaMikdash, would be considered shatnez, and you would not be allowed to wear such a thing. That's called kilai begadim. But with regard to the avoda of the Kohanim in the Beis HaMikdash, the entire enterprise of kilai begadim is completely ignored. It's completely out of context. But we're not sure whether the avneit of the Kohen Hedjot, which is one of his four begadim, was made of shatnez, was made of a combination of both linen and wool, or was it pure linen? It was pishtan on the highest level, a very fancy pishtan is called boots. Now, why is this issue coming up here in the first parak of Masechta Yoma? And the answer is because it's quite possible that the avnate of the Kohen Hedjot was radically different than that of the Kohen Gadol. And if we could establish that the avnate of the Kohen Gadol was X, the avnate of a Kohen Hedjot was Y. For example, let's assume, and we'll try to prove this through the psukim in the Torah, that the avnate of the Kohen Gadol was made of kelaim. It was made of both linen and wool woven together. But the avnate of the Kohen Hedjot, and again, we're going to have one school of thought, was made of boots, was made of pure pishtan. It did not have any admixture of wool. And it means that there's a fundamental difference between the avnate of the Kohen Gadol and the avnate of the Kohen Hedjot. That's going to solve our problem. Why? Because when the second string Kohen Gadol steps up to the plate, as we say in American baseball, and now he has to fill in the shoes of the Kohen Gadol, who became Tomei, he's going to do his avodah with a different beged than he would wear if he were a Kohen Hedjot. And that itself is an act of chinuch, because as we said, we need some sort of heker, some sort of clear indication that a change was made. He's no longer serving as a Kohen Hedjot, he's now serving as a Kohen Gadol, and that's going to endow him with Kedusha. If he changes his avnate, even though again that's only one of four begadim, and he takes off the avnate that he would wear as a Kohen Hedjot and replaces it with the avnate of a Kohen Gadol, if I assume, for example, that the Kohen Hedjot would only wear an avnate that was made of pure linen without any admixture of wool, now he has to pick up a different avnate, the avnate of the Kohen Gadol, which is kelaim, and is woven from both wool and linen together. And that very change in the avnate, from the avnate of a Kohen Hedjot to the avnate of Kohen Gadol, that itself engenders a heker, such that now his avodah is clearly being implemented as a Kohen Gadol. So this discussion that we're about to embark upon about the material from which the avnate was made, and I'm talking about the avnate of a Kohen Hedjot, becomes very relevant to our discussion about the second string Kohen Gadol, who is now stepping into the shoes of the first Kohen Gadol, and how we are able to be machanechem. We can avoid Rav Papa's radical revolutionary chiddush, his approach that the avodah itself is machanechem. We're not going to go that far because we need something other than the avodah to be machanechem, namely has to wear begadim. Now, as we discussed 2 weeks ago, for anyone who remembers, a lot of time has passed since then, and we had Chanukah in between. We mentioned that although the Kohen Gadol during the entire year wears 8 begadim, in addition to the 4 of the Kohen Hedjot, he wears an additional 4 begadim. All that is true for 364 days out of the year, but there's one day of the year which is the exception, and that's Yom Kippurim. On Yom Kippurim, the Kohen Gadol wears 4 begadim. And it's quite possible that those 4 begadim are identical to the 4 begadim of the Kohen Hedjot. That would be true if I assume that the avnate of the Kohen Hedjot was made of kelaim. It was made of a combination of wool and linen, because then it's identical with the avnate of the Kohen Gadol. And that's one school of thought. And if I grant you that the avnate of the Kohen Hedjot was made of kelaim, and therefore it's identical with the avnate of the Kohen Gadol, which is for sure made of kelaim, as we'll see the pasuk says it, then we are led into this whole trap of how to establish a heker and a chinuch for the second string Kohen Gadol, because his avnate as a Kohen Hedjot is identical with the avnate of the Kohen Gadol. So we're left with 4 begadim unless we can find one beged, and the only candidate here is the avnate that is different between the Kohen Hedjot and the Kohen Gadol. If they're all 4 identical, including the avnate, then we're stuck with our problem. And we had a Bai solution, and we had Rav Papa solution. But the Gemara is raising a very exciting possibility that the solution to this problem is simply that the Kohen Hedjot will now wear the begadim of the Kohen Gadol, and by doing so, he is changing his avnate. If we assume that the avnate of the Kohen Hedjot is made of what? Of pishtan, of boots, without any wool, then it's clearly identified as the avnate of the Kohen Hedjot. He takes off that avnate when he starts the avoda to replace the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippurim, puts on the avnate of the Kohen Gadol, which is clearly made of kelaim, and that itself is the heker that we need. And so when he starts his avoda, he's wearing a new set of begadim. One change in the beged is enough. And I want to point out to you that we're going to have a discussion about the Kohen Gadol, not in a case where he had to be replaced. Let's talk about a classic case. The Kohen Gadol, Baruch Hashem, did all the avoda of Yom Kippurim, survived. There was no irua, there was no mishap, no tumah. And now the question is, since the begadim of the Kohen Gadol are 4 in number on Yom Kippurim, and only on Yom Kippur, the rest of the year there are 8, can he bequeath his begadim to a Kohen Hedjot? What do I mean? We're assuming, as we'll try to prove later, that the Kohen Gadol cannot wear the same 4 begadim from one Yom Kippurim to the next Yom Kippurim. Whatever begadim he wears on one Yom Kippurim, he's got to change to a new set for next Yom Kippurim. But there's a whole year in between. What do we do with these begadim? Do we just bury them? Do we put them into what we call geniza? Or can a Kohen Hedjot wear those 4 begadim? And the Gemara is going to have a whole machlokus about this between Rabbi Dosa and the Chachamim. But the very fact that this issue is being placed on the table indicates that the 4 begadim that the Kohen Gadol wore on Yom Kippurim are identical with the 4 begadim that the Kohen Hedjot wears. The question is it an insult if the Kohen Hedjot would take upon himself those 4 begadim that were worn for the highest level of avoda on Yom Kippurim? That's an issue about which the Tanoim are going to be divided with a great controversy. But the very fact that we're raising that possibility indicates that all 4 begadim of the Kohen Gadol were identical with all 4 begadim that the Kohen Hedjot wore during the course of the year, which means, by definition, that the avnate of a Kohen Hedjot is made of kelaim, because otherwise this whole issue is ridiculous. You cannot even entertain the idea that the Kohen Hedjot will wear those 4 begadim of the Kohen Gadol, because it's a whole different avnate. So I'm just pointing out to you, as we go through this sugya, keep in mind the possibility that the Kohen Hedjot wore the same identical avnate made of kelaim the whole year round. With regard to Kohen Hedjot, there's no difference in Yom Kippur or any other day of the year. And if we assume his avnate was made of kelaim, then we have a problem, because then he's wearing the identical avnate of the Kohen Gadol, and there's no heker if the Kohen Hedjot, now steps up in order to replace the Kohen Gadol. And we're going to have to use either Abai's answer or Rav Papa's approach. But the exciting possibility here opens up as a wonderful opportunity The door opens in front of us. If I assume that the avnet of the Kohen Hedjot was made of boots, was made of pishton, without any mixture of wool, then we can solve that problem of being mechanech this Kohen Hedjot and making him into a Kohen Gadol by simply wearing the begadim, which means he would change his avnet, and that would be a heker. That would be clearly indicative of the fact that he is now serving as a Kohen Gadol. He also Rav Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, Omar, and he made the following declaration. He said that, now I should mention about Rav Dimi. Rav Dimi in Shas plays a very interesting role, and he and Ravin are the two Amoraim that were constantly going back from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael. There were two great centers of Torah learning at the time. Bavel was actually the greater center, but there was also a center of Torah learning in Eretz Yisrael. And Rav Dimi was one of the people who came very often from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, and then he would go back to Eretz Yisrael. When he came to Bavel, he would bring with him the Shmua, the Torah that he heard in Eretz Yisrael, usually from Rabbi Yochanan, that was his Rebbe. In any event, on one particular occasion, when Rav Dimi came from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael, on his way back, Omar, he made the following declaration. Avneto shel Kohen Hedjot. What was the material, and was there K'layim in the avnet of a Kohen Hedjot, or was it pure books, pure linen? And he said, Rebbe, Rabbi Elazar, Reb Shimon. There was a debate about this between Rebbe on the one hand and Rabbi Elazar, Reb Shimon. Chad Omer, according to one opinion, the avnet of the Kohen Hedjot was K'layim. It was woven with both wool and pishton together. And again, if you'll ask the question, well, how could that be? If it's K'layim, the Torah prohibits wearing K'layim. And the answer is that in Avodas HaMikdash of the Kohen Gadol, there was K'layim. The Torah itself commands K'layim, so that one opinion has it that the avnet of the Kohen Hedjot was made of K'layim. Which, by the way, means that the question that I raised earlier, would the Kohen Hedjot be able to inherit the four begadim of the Kohen Gadol that we used on Yom HaKippurim, after Yom HaKippurim? It's a very relevant question, because the avnet of the Kohen Gadol and the avnet of the Kohen Hedjot both were identical. V'chad Omar shel butz, but the other Tana insisted that the avnet of Kohen Hedjot was made of wool without any admixture of, was made of linen without any admixture of wool. It was not K'layim. And therefore, it was radically different than the avnet of the Kohen Gadol, which was made of K'layim. Now, how do I know that the avnet of the Kohen Gadol was made of K'layim? This is a pasuk that says the following. In Shmos Lamed Tes, at the very end of Sefer Shmos, the Torah says, with regard to the avnet of the Kohen Gadol, v'es havnet sheish mashzar tcheles. Now, the word sheish is identical with pishtan. The biblical word for linen is sheish. In our language, as it evolved through Bavel, the word is pishtan, but in biblical Hebrew it's called sheish. Now, the pasuk says tcheles. Tcheles, by definition, is wool. It's a dyed wool. And the Torah says about the Avnei of the Kohen Gadol that it is sheish mashzar tcheles, which means sheish, referring to linen. Mashzar means woven. Tcheles together with tcheles, which is made of wool. So we have k'layim in the Avnei of the Kohen Gadol. And that applies the whole year round. But with regard to the Avnei of the Kohen Hedjot, the Torah doesn't spell out exactly how it was made. Was it woven pure boots, which means only linen, or was it k'layim, and it was identical to the Avnei of the Kohen Gadol? And Rav Dimi reports that this is a machlokas between Rebbe and Rav Elazar Reb Shimon. But can you tell me, Rav Dimi, who holds what? Notice the language he uses. Chad Omar, according to one opinion, shel k'layim, and Chad Omar shel boots. Well, who's the Chad and who's the Chad? You're telling me it's a machlokas between Rebbe and Rav Elazar Reb Shimon, but you don't tell me who holds what. So the Gemara now does, I would say, almost embarks upon an investigation to see if we can pin it down. Now, all we have to do is pin down one of the two Tanoim here. If, for example, we can figure out what Rebbe holds, then by process of elimination, the fallback is that Rav Elazar Reb Shimon holds the other opinion. Tistayim, which means I'm going to bring you a proof. The Rebbe who di Omar shel k'layim, that Rebbe is of the opinion that the Kohen Hedjot wore an avneit that was made of k'layim, just like the avneit of the Kohen Gadol. Which means that in our problem of how to be machanech the Kohen Sheni to replace the Kohen Rishon, we have a serious problem because Rebbe identifies the Kohen Hedjot's avneit as the same as the Kohen Gadol's avneit. So where's the heker that would engender the kiddush to sanctify the Kohen Sheni? Now, how do we prove that Rebbe identifies the avneit of the Kohen Hedjot as k'layim? This sadi. Now, the brisa is very short, very abridged, and we're going to really have to work very hard to see and analyze this brisa in order to prove and establish that Rebbe's opinion is that the avneit of the Kohen Hedjot was k'layim. This sanya, ein bein Kohen Gadol Kohen Hedjot, ella avneit. The only difference between the Kohen Gadol and the Kohen Hedjot in terms of their begadim is only the avneit, divrei Rebbe. Now wait a second. This sounds like the exact opposite of what we tried to prove. We're trying to prove that Rebbe identifies the avnei of the Kohen Hedjot as k'layim. And now he's telling us in this price just the opposite. That if you're looking for a difference, a contrast between the begadim of the Kohen Hedjot and that of the Kohen Gadol, the difference is in the avneit. How does that indicate that according to Rebbe, the avneit of the Kohen Hedjot was made of k'layim? On the contrary, this should lead me to the exact opposite approach. And my conclusion would be that Rebbe holds that the avneit of the Kohen Hedjot was made of boots. And now we see the difference between the avneit of the Kohen Hedjot and that of the Kohen Gadol. So we're going to have to wait to see how the story unfolds. And the Gemara has a different analysis of this brisa. Rav Elazar Reb Shimon Omer, af lo avneit. Even in the avneit itself, you cannot tell the difference between the avneit of the Kohen Gadol and that of the Kohen Hedjot. They're identical. Which sounds like, according to Rav Elazar Reb Shimon, he holds that the Avnei of the Kohen Hedjo was K'layim, and therefore it's identical with that of the Kohen Gadol. And therefore, I would have come to the exact opposite conclusion at this point, namely that according to Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon, he maintains that the Avnei of the Kohen Hedjo was made of K'layim, and Rebbe was the one who held that the Avnei of the Kohen Hedjo was made of butz. And yet, the Gemara says, Tistayim the Rebbe Hu Yomer shel K'layim. My heart, what's going on? Now, in order to make some progress here and understand how the Gemara analyzes this brisa, we're going to have to ask another question. Amos, the Gemara says. If we're analyzing this brisa, we have to put it in one of two possible contexts. Are we talking about Yoma Kippurim, or are we talking about the rest of the year? And the Gemara is going to say there's a major difference. Amos, what time of the calendar are we talking about? We know that the Avnei of the Kohen Gadol, that's explicit in the Torah, was made of K'layim. And that applies during the entire year. But we also know something else. I'm going to read to you another pasuk. The pasuk says that V'zos yavo Aaron el HaKodesh ba'avnei bad yachgor. The Torah explains, or describes, I should say, the avnei that was worn by the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippurim as bad. Now, the word bad means that it's made of one substance. It's what we call big day lavan, in this case made of linen. Now, this is fascinating, because as we saw before, the Torah explicitly describes the Avnei of the Kohen Gadol as sheish mashzar tcheles, which means it's made of a combination of linen and wool. It's K'layim. How do we reconcile that with the pasuk that says ubavnei bad yachgor, which means it's made up only of linen? And the answer is that there's a difference between the avnei that was worn by the Kohen Gadol the whole year round and that avnei which he wore on Yom Kippurim. On Yom Kippurim, the avnei of the Kohen Gadol was made of pishtan. In contrast with the avnei of the Kohen Gadol the whole year round, that was made of K'layim. And nobody debates any of those facts. Those are the given. Number one, the avnei of the Kohen Gadol the whole year round, 364, was made of K'layim. Number two, that on Yom Kippurim, the avnei of the Kohen Gadol was made of butz, called in the Torah bad. Okay, so Amos. Let's get back to the Gemara of Amos. And the Gemara says the following. Once again, one last introduction just for myself. This brisa is addressing the issue of the avnei of the Kohen Hedjot. The avnei of the Kohen Hedjot is an issue 365 days out of the year. It doesn't change on Yom Kippurim. And we have now a machlokes as to what was the avnei of the Kohen Hedjot made of the whole year round, including Yom Kippurim. We have no issues whatsoever with regard to the avnei of the Kohen Gadol. The whole year round it was made of K'layim, and on Yom Kippurim it was made of pishtan. I don't get it, says the Gemara. There's a machlokus here recorded in the brisa, and the machlokus is meant to analyze: is there a difference between the begadim of the Kohen Hedjot and that of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippurim? Well, It's got to be Yom Kippur, because if it's Shar Yemos Hashanah, the whole question is ridiculous. Because in Shar Yemos Hashanah, the Kohen Gadol wore 8 begadim. The Kohen Hedger only wore 4 begadim the entire year. So how could the Brisa say, Ein Bein Kohen Gadol le Kohen Hedger Ella? What do you mean Ein Bein Ella? There's no comparison. The whole year round, there's no comparison between the big day kahuna of a Kohen Hedger and that of a Kohen Gadol. The latter would wear 8 begadim, whereas the Kohen Hedger would wear only 4 begadim. So the Gemara says, B'Shar Yemos Hashanah, Tuva Ika. There are many differences between the Kohen Gadol and his begadim and that of the Kohen Hedger. There's no reason why the Brisa has to rack its brains with the Machlokas Tanoim to figure out where's the difference between the big day kahuna of the Kohen Hedger and that of the Kohen Gadol. The whole year round, the Kohen Gadol wore 8 begadim and the Kohen Hedger wore 4 begadim. Kohen Gadol b'shamish b'shmona, v'hedjot b'arba. So therefore, by process of elimination, elolav b'yom kippurim. On that day of Yom Kippurim, when the Kohen Gadol wore the avneit that was made of ishtan, and he only wore 4 begadim on Yom Kippurim. So now we have machlokes between Rebbe and Rebbe Elazar Reb Shimon. Is there a difference between the Kohen Gadol and the Kohen Hedjot as far as the begadim of Yom Kippurim are concerned? And Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon says that there is no difference. If he holds that there is no difference, then it must be that Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon holds that the avneit of the Kohen Hedjot was made of pishtan. Hence, it was identical with the avneit of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippurim. Because as we said before, the only exception to k'layim in the avneit of the Kohen Gadol during the entire year is Yom Kippurim, when the avneit was made of butz. And now, if Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon is identifying the avneit as one of the 4 begadim of the Kohen Hedger with that of the Kohen Gadol, he must be holding that the avneit of the Kohen Hedger was made of butz. Rabbi Rebbe, on the other hand, says that there's a fundamental difference between the avneit of the Kohen Gadol and that of the Kohen Hedger, because the avneit of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippurim, and only on Yom Kippurim, was made of butz. Hence, it's different than the avneit of the Kohen Gadol, because Rebbe holds that the avneit of the Kohen Gadol was made of k'layim. And now we begin to understand the word tistayim. Tistayim to Rebbe Hu, the Omar, shel k'layim. That Rebbe holds that the Kohen Hedjot wore an avneit of k'layim. And that stands in stark contrast with the avneit of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippurim, because on Yom Kippurim, the avneit of the Kohen Gadol was made of butz, was made of bad. It was not made of k'layim. We now begin to understand Rebbe's statement as recorded in this brisa, that if you want to find a contrast between Big Day Kohen Gadol and Big Day Kohen Hedger on Yom Kippurim, you'll find it in the avneit, because the avneit of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippurim was made of pishtan, and the avneit of the Kohen Hedger, not only on Yom Kippurim but the whole year round, was made of k'layim. And that's the proof that in this machlokas that Rav Dimi brought and presented, but he didn't he didn't do the matching job. We can now do the matching job. Let's go back to Rav Dimi. Rav Dimi says, Avnei shel Kohen Hedjot. There's a machlokas between Rebbe and Rebbe Elazar and Reb Shimon. Chad Omar shel k'layim, v'chad Omar shel butz. Now I understand that it's Rebbe who holds shel k'layim. Therefore, Rebbe says we now have a contrast between the Avnate of the Kohen Hedjot, which is made of Kalaim, and the Avnate of the Kohen Gadol on Yoma Kippurim, which is made of butz, and therefore we can match up Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon with the Mandiyama, with the Shita that the Avnate of the Kohen Hedjot was made of butz. And if it was made of butz, then on Yom Kippurim, it was identical with the Avnate of the Kohen Gadol. Now, honestly, I was very excited about this. But, the way it works in Gemara, I don't have to tell you, is that, it's like a yo-yo. It goes up and it goes down. Because after building this magnificent structure, the Gemara is going to destroy it. It's called Meleches Soser in Hilchos Shabbos. Amri, the Bnei Yeshiva, said, "Lo, you have no proof from your brisa to pin Rebbe down to the opinion that the Avnate of the Kohen Hedjot the whole year round was made of Kalaim. Liolam, I'm going to argue from the opposite position. That B'shar Yemos Hashana, the brisa is talking about the rest of the year. We had a kasha. If we're talking about the whole year round, not on Yom Kippur, so the whole subject matter of this brisa is just ridiculous. The brisa is looking for some difference between the big day kahuna, the Kohen Hedjot, and that of the Kohen Gadol the whole year round. The Kohen Gadol wore 8 begadim, and the Kohen Hedjot wore 4 begadim. So what's the issue here that the brisa is addressing? Our answer is Bahanaf Tishavin. What the brisa is asking is, what is the status of 4 out of the 8 begadim? Those 4 begadim that are common to both a Kohen Hedjot and a Kohen Gadol the whole year round. Meaning that if you list the 8 begadim of the Kohen Gadol and you structure it in such a way, there'll be an overlap in 4 begadim with that of a Kohen Hedjot, which we said before, the mitznefes and the ketones and the mithnasayim and the avnei. The brisa wants to know, is there any difference between those 4 begadim during the entire course of the year that are worn by the Kohen Hedjot and those that are worn by Kohen Gadol? If that's the case, then we have a whole different spin on this brisa. Rebbe is now telling us that during the entire year, the Kohen Gadol wore, of course, nobody denies this, an avnate that was made of Kalaim, and the Kohen Hedjot wore his avnate that was made of butz, which is the exact opposite of what we just proved, and we gave ourselves a talash, because we finally figured it all out. So now the Gemara is pushing the agenda that Rebbe holds that the avnate of a Kohen Hedjot was made of butz, and it was starkly, fundamentally different in contrast with the avnate of the Kohen Gadol, which was made of Kalaim, and we're talking about 4 begadim during the entire year. Now, according to the Gemara's logic at this point, where do we fit in Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon? Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon is going to argue that the 4 begadim of the Kohen Hedjot and 4 out of the parallel 4 out of the 8 begadim of the Kohen Gadol during the entire course of the year were identical, which means that Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon maintains that the avnate of the Kohen Hedjot was made of Kalaim. So we now come to the exact opposite conclusion that we came to before when we analyzed this brisa, because we thought that this brisa was referring to Yom Kippurim, and we came to the conclusion that Stavka Rebbe, who identifies the avnate of the Kohen Hedjot as Kalaim. Now we're coming to the exact opposite opinion. It's Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon who defines and describes the avnate of the Kohen Hedjot as Kalaim, and therefore during the entire course of the year, the avnate of the Kohen Hedjot and the other 3 begadim were identical with the Avnei of the Kohen Gadol and those other three begotten. Now, as I mentioned to you before, there were two great Amoraim who were contemporaries that used to go back and forth from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael and back to Bavel, and they would transmit the Torah of the Chachmei Bavel to the Israelis, to the Chachmei Eretz Yisrael. And in those days, you didn't have to go into quarantine. You could drop by Ben Gurion Airport and you came in, they asked you where you're coming from. You said, I came from Bavel. What are you doing here in Eretz Yisrael? Did you come for a grandson's bar mitzvah? What'd you come for? Oh, I came to transmit Torah. You don't have to go into quarantine. Anyway, Ki Asa Ravin. Ravin was the colleague of Rav Dimi. Omar, he made the following statement. Now, what's really interesting about this statement is that he explicitly reveals Rebbe's opinion on the question of what the Avnei of the Kohen Hedjot was made. Omar, Avneito shel Kohen Gadol b'Yom Kippurim divrei hakol shel butz. Right? The Torah says bad, and nobody denies what's explicit in the Bible at the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippurim were butz. B'Shayim Hashanah, once again, the Torah is outspoken about this. Divrei hakol shel Kelaim. Lo nechleku the machlokas shin Rebbe and Reb Elazar Reb Shimon, ela b'Avneito shel Kohen Hedjot. Bein b'Shayim Hashanah bein b'Yom Kippurim, because once we identify the Avnei of the Kohen Hedjot, that's true for all 365 days of the year. Rebbe Omer shel Kelayim, Rebbe Elazar Reb Shimon Omer shel Butz, which means that even though the Gemara rejected our fantastic interpretation of the Brisa and restructured, reframed the entire Brisa as referring to Shayavos Hashanah, but the Gemara now is going back to its original understanding of the Brisa that we're talking about Yom Kippurim. Rebbe is going to be of the opinion that the Kohen Hedjot wore an Avnei of Kelayim. Hence, the Kohen Hedjot stands in stark contrast with the Avnei of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippurim, which was made of butz. And Reb Elazar Reb Shimon is of the opinion that the Avnei of the Kohen Hedjot is made of butz, and therefore on Yom Kippurim, the Avnei of the Kohen Hedjot and the Avnei of the Kohen Gadol were identical. That's the final maskana. And the way we know this is because Ravin told us exactly who holds what. Rav Dimi left it up in the air. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Achanan Namitnina. I also found a brisa, and from this brisa, we're going to be able to determine Rebbe's shita about the Avnei of Kohen Hedjot, that it was made of Kelaim. Now, by introduction, this brisa is analyzing a parsha in the Torah in the 6th chapter of Vayikra, which is the mitzvah of Trumas Hadeshen. This was a daily mitzvah in the Beis HaMikdash, and it was a very unique avoda in the sense that it was just cleaning up ashes. What happened is that after a full day of hakrava, now keep in mind that the emurim are burnt on the mizbeach at night, and before daybreak, they concluded the process of haktaras emurim on the maracha, which was on the top, the gag of the mizbeach. And what we were left with was the ashes of the emurim, of the chalavim, and the ivarim that were burnt on the marach, on the mizbech. And the Kohen had to clear out the deshen, and he had to bring it to a special area called the Beis HaDeshen. And he had to wear big day kahuna. That's why I say this is a very unique kind of an avoda, because you and I would have said that it's like the lowest of the avoda, just cleaning up the ashes. But it's not low at all. I mean, it requires the full the full begodim of the Kohen Hedge. Now I'm going to read to you the pasuk because it's not quoted here in the Gemara in its whole form, and you'll appreciate that there's one extra word in the pasuk. The pasuk says the following: "V'lavash hakohen midovad u'michnasei vad." Now midovad is a reference to the ksones, and michnasei vad is the michnasayim. And the Kohen is wearing these begodim. And then it says, Yilbash al basaro. Now, you're repeating yourself. You just finished saying Vilavash. So why do you have to say Yilbash? And the Brisa now is going to try to see what we can derive from this extra word, Yilbash. Al basaro. Al basaro means the Torah could have just said, "V'lavash al bisaro." Matamuloma yilbash al bisaro. When it already says at the beginning of the pasuk "v'lavash," the yilbash is totally redundant. And first we have the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Then we're going to get to Rabbi Dosa. Says Rabbi Yehuda, "Yilbash lahavi mitznefes v'avneit." There are only two begodim that are singled out explicitly in the pasuk: the ksones and the michnasayim. What about the other two begodim that a kohen hedjed is required to wear? The mitznefes and the avneit. So the word the word yilbash, which is a superfluous word, is coming to indicate that there are another two begodim. He's got to wear all four begodim. There's no such thing as an avoda in the Beis Hamikdash with less than four begodim. But the Havamina was that maybe in the case of Trumas Hadeshen, the Torah might have lowered its standards, its demands, and 2 out of the 4 begodim are sufficient, and that's why the Torah explicitly mentions only 2. The answer is the extra word, the Yilbash, says Rabbi Yehuda, is coming to include the other 2 begodim, rounding it off at the 4 begodim that a Kohen Hedjed has to wear, and he's got to wear them for the Trumas Hadeshen. Rabbi Dosa Omer, this is really exciting. Lahavi big day Kohen Gadol, Yoma Kippurim Shem Ksherim LeKohen Hedjel. You may recall that we touched on this very fascinating question. The Kohen Gadol wore 4 begodim on Yom Kippurim. They were the same 4 begodim that a Kohen Hedjel wears the entire year round. Why throw out those begodim after the avod of Yom Kippur is complete? Why not bequeath those begodim to a Kohen Hedjel? Now the premise here is that those 4 begodim of the Kohen Gadol are identical with the 4 begodim of the Kohen Hedjel, which would only make sense if you hold like Rabbi Elazar of Shimon that the Kohen Hedjel wore an avneit of boots of linen, and now since the Kohen Gadol wore an avneit of boots on Yom Kippurim, it makes sense that we would allow the Kohen Hedjot. I don't know who we're going to choose. Maybe there was a lottery for that. Go to your local lotto, and see if you could win the great prize of inheriting the begodim of the Kohen Gadol. And you would have thought, if not for the extra word Yilbash, that this is like an insult. Who are you to wear the begodim that we use by the Kohen Gadol, l'fnai v'l'fnim in the Kodesh Kadoshim? And the Torah says Yilbash. And ksherim l'kohen hedjot. Rebbe Omer, Rebbe says, no. The Kohen Hedjot is not allowed to use the begodim that the Kohen Gadol used to do the avoda on Yom Kippur. Shtei tshuvas begodim. I have 2 different logically compelling arguments against Rabbi Dosa's position. Hada, number 1, it's not the same 4 begodim. Because Avneitel Shal Gadol B'Yom Kippurim loads Avneitel Shal Kohen Hedjot. This is Rebbe, as we've established it, based on the testimony of Ravin, who holds that the Kohen Hedjot wore an avneit that was made of k'layim, whereas the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippurim had to wear an avneit that was made of pishtan. So there's no way that you can tell me that the Kohen Hedjot would inherit and wear the begodim of the Kohen Gadol because he's not wearing the right avneit. The Od, and furthermore, begodim shenishtamshu ben b'kedusha chamura. Yishtamish ben kedusha kala. We have a principle called Mailim B'Kodesh, V'lo Moridim B'Kodesh. In fact, I don't know if you came across this on Hanukkah. We had this issue between Beis Hill and Beit Shammai, and Beis Hill argues Mailim B'Kodesh. You know, you can't start with 8 candles on the first night, which was Beit Shammai, and go down. You got to go up. We only go up. We never go down. Forget about that song, that what goes up comes down. Forget about that. We got to constantly go up. So what happens? The Kohen Gadol wears these 4 begodim, lifnai v'lifnim, inside the Kodesh Kodashim. And that's called the Kedusha Chamura. You can't get more Chamura than lifnai v'lifnim. And now you're going to take these begodim and you're going to designate them for use on the part of the Kohen Hedjot in the Beis HaMikdash outside the Kodesh Kodashim. You are violating the principle of Mailim B'Kodesh. Elamah Talmud Lomar. But now we swing back to the Pasuk Yilbash. We had the drasha of Rabbi Yehuda, but Rebbe has a different drasha, and he derives a different halacha from the word Yilbash. L'rabos es hashchakim. Now the word shchakim is synonymous with the word bluyim, if you're familiar with that word. And what that means is that the begodim, after a long time of use, they become bluyim. Bluyim means they become like disintegrated. And now you might ask, is it appropriate for a Kohen to do the avoda with begodim bluyim? And Rebbe says that the pasuk says Yilbash to tell me that even bluyim is acceptable for the avoda and the begodim. Why? Because Rebbe differentiates between 2 categories: bluyim and kruim. Kruim with an ayin, miloshin kera. If any of the begodim are ripped, they are disqualified as bigdei kahuna. But if they're not ripped, they're still intact. There are no rips, just that they're worn down. That's called shchakim or bluyim, and these are kosher for the avot. But in any event, we see something very clear from this brisa, and that's what Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak was so excited about, that Rebbe is of the opinion that the avneit of the Kohen Hedjot was made of k'layim, and therefore Rebbe answered and argued against Rabbi Dosa. How can you possibly entertain the possibility that the Kohen Hedjot will inherit the 4 begodim of the Kohen Gadol that he wore on Yom Kippurim? The avneit of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippurim was made of boots, whereas the avneit of the Kohen Hedjot was made of k'layim. Now, I know we're running out of time, but I just want to add another few lines in the Gemara, and then I'll let you go. The Asda Rabbi Dosa l'tameh. Rabbi Dosa, who allows the Kohen Hedjot to inherit and wear the begodim of the Kohen Gadol, is very consistent. This Sanya, because we have a brisa, and in the parsha of Avodas Yom Kippurim and Achrimos, the pasuk says, I'll read to you the whole pasuk, Hu ba Aaron el Oel Moed upashat es bigdei abad, asher lavash bevo'o el hakodesh, v'nicham sham. In other words, Aaron leaves the entire avodah of Yom Kippurim. He completes the avodah. He takes his begodim and he puts them there. And the Brisa now records a machlokus between the Tanakama and Rabbi Dosa. The Tanakama says, Sham melame shetu'unim gniza. He's got to take the 4 begadim that he wore on Yom Kippurim for the avoda, and he's got to conceal them. He's got to hide them. No one should have access to them, which means that the Tanakama of this Brisa reflects the sheet of Rebbe that we saw in the previous Brisa, the Brisa of Rabbi Nachman, namely that how can you allow the Kedusha Chamura to be downgraded to a Kedusha Kala? But now we know that Rabbi Dosa could not tolerate that interpretation of V'nicham Sham, because Rabbi Dosa says, no, don't put away the begadim of the Kohen Gadol. We want to use them. What's V'nicham Sham? Shalish Tavish Bahem B'Yom Kippurim Ach. The Torah is only telling that relative to the Kohen Gadol, it's K'nisa, meaning as far as the Kohen Gadol is concerned, it's hidden from him. He's not allowed to wear the same begadim next year. But as far as the Kohen Hedjot is concerned, the Kohen Hedjot certainly is allowed to wear those begadim. We will encourage him to do so. And the word Geniza here is too extreme. It's out of place, says Rabbi Dosa, because Adarab, on the contrary, Rabbi Dosa is of the opinion that the extra word Yilbash that we spoke about before teaches us that Kohen Hedjot is allowed to wear the begadim of the Kohen Gadol, and therefore don't interpret the words V'nicham Sham as Geniza in the classic sense of Geniza. It's only Geniza vis-a-vis the Kohen Gadol, because he's not allowed to wear those begadim a year down the line, a second round for these begadim on the following Yom Kippur.